All right, we're live again. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Work in Progress, the show about work, life, and everything in between from the Reno Collective. My name is Colin.
And I am Rachel.
Welcome back.
Yes.
We
So we're getting energized, right? You
we're
said
getting
synthwave.
energized. Yeah, we've
It's the
got
music.
some synthwave music going. What we're going to be talking about today is a book, but also more of a kind of a theme from a book called "The Way We're Working Isn't Working" by Tony Schwartz. So, how did we get on this topic, and uh, where we go?
Wow. We were talking about how to manage time, productivity, and such about a month ago. And I think it was the first episode of January. And it led us into discussing this to Tony's work and the idea of input, output. Where does your energy go? How to do an audit? What's the usefulness of it? And so it ended up, here we are today, 1 month later, plus a little bit, chatting about that in specific, because it can be really, really helpful to be able to break it down and understand where your energy is going, because energy and time are not necessarily equitable. They're not exactly the same thing. So your energy input and output are important as far as where your time is going, but they're not equal.
Right, and I think we this kind of came up when one of our members mentioned, like, that we seem to talk a lot about these like nonfiction person like productivity and self-help books. Is that I think that we come to these books a lot because people are looking for ways to get more done or do more faster, things like that. And we're gonna kind of turn it on. We've been having a few episodes where we try to say that you need to slow down and you need to figure out where your time's going and you need to charge for your time. But the other
Right.
part is, that literally, as this book title is, "The Way We're Working Isn't Working." I see
Mm-hmm.
way too many freelancers and small business owners, entrepreneurs, people who think that the way through is to like just beat their head against the wall and do more of that, right? To do more
Yeah.
hours, more hard work, rather than smarter work. And I know you've mentioned that a lot, right? Working
Mm-hmm.
smarter, not harder. And so I
Yeah.
think today we're going to look at what he talks about in his energy audit, and we're going to give you a simple way to do your own energy audit, and we'll maybe talk about a few things you can do in each of those categories that might be able to help. So
Yep. Absolutely.
cool. So
Alrighty.
he breaks this down. So essentially, what we're looking at is an energy audit, and this is like your personal energy audit. It doesn't have to be,
Mm-hmm.
work related, but for most of us, if we think of it holistically, like your whole day, including sleep, if you're able to track that, are the things you're doing giving you energy or taking away? And he breaks it down into four dimensions, which are what are those four dimensions?
Yep. Physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual are the four that he breaks it down into. So, physical, we were talking earlier, off off mic, about the idea that exercise is an output of energy, right? But for a lot of us, and maybe not everyone, for a lot of us, that also gives us energy.
Mm-hmm.
If I exercise early in the morning, then I do actually have a burst of energy or a longer lasting amount of energy that takes me through the day.
Right.
If I sit on my ass for the week and I don't get up, then most likely I'm going to be lagging that whole week plus some.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
this is
there's,
this is where that holistic approach comes in. I think
mm-hmm,
he actually specifically mentions that most of us take our health for granted, and that we just think it's going to
yeah,
be a given that we'll hammer through this week and we'll catch up on it next week, right? And you
yeah,
literally create like a sleep debt, you create an energy debt that you need to repay with interest, and that's going to be other symptoms, other problems. That the irony is like, oh, I can sleep when I'm dead type of attitude is, I'm going to get this done now, get paid now, and I'll catch up. But then you're like, well, you probably need to work hard next week and the week after that. Like, there is no
yeah,
easy way to catch up unless you're able to like take a break, which is
yeah,
going to be one of the strategies here, which is to take breaks, and to keep the body in shape, and work out, especially if you find something that gives you energy. Like, I know
mm-hmm,
for you that might be swimming, that might be going on walks and things. And some of these overlap, right? We have physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. So some of these things
Right.
are going to tick multiple boxes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the We were also talking about work. So, different types of work, right? There's physical, more manual labor, which can also include some of the creative arts. I mean, when you're talking photography and videography, there's a lot of physical and manual, output of effort. But then sometimes, sitting, even though we're sitting at our desks, we're not moving. There's actually quite a lot of energy that's being spent. I think you had mentioned you had your like an Apple Watch device on and you had been streaming. And then when you looked down, you realized it had tracked that you had done X amount of steps
Right.
and your heart rate had changed. And so you weren't actually moving, but the mental and probably somewhat emotional energy output was being measured physically in that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I mean, I think because this show is live, I mean, I feel comfortable doing it now, but like in the early days, it's pretty nerve wracking,
Mm-hmm.
and you push that button, and even if no
Yeah.
one's listening, I know some of you are out there listening, but you know, for me, it picked it up as a high, like a heart rate spike for a consistent period of time. So for a full 30 minutes, it thought like that I was, as far as it's concerned, it thought I was on a run or something, and
Right.
it's interesting to see how if you're in a stressed state, that's going to amplify and become like distress. Because this isn't from Tony Schwartz, but there's another author that I'll have to find and put in the show notes, but that talks about stress as both distress and eustress. So there's like good kinds of stress, and a good kind of stress would be going and working out and spending doing something physical that gets endorphins going, and it's almost like a reset for the body, and in a way, a lot of people need to just kind of think about things without being in front of a computer or in front of a pen or things like that.
Right. Right. Exactly. Standing up and getting away from whatever your constant hourly output is.
Yeah.
So the spiritual one is interesting because of the input output. I mean, we can remove like not religion side of it, but I would imagine that that's also, tied in spiritual and emotional tie-ins, depending on where you get your sort of spiritual energy from or that you output. I think a lot of people would say like meditation, going for, perhaps long walks or hikes on their own. So yeah, that one caught my eye with the 4 dimensions. It was an interesting, to me, it was an interesting twist to it.
Yeah, I think spiritual with his book goes into like purpose,
Mm,
and whether or not you feel like what you're doing is the right thing,
right.
and so kind of having intention. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like a spiritual practice or religious practice. It can be a north star, a guiding principle, first
Mm-hmm.
principles if that's something that you're interested in looking into. It's like thinking through like why are you doing a thing, and obviously like if you're
Right.
doing work that you don't feel like is meaningful, that's going to affect your other areas of your life, and
Yeah.
I think we talk about this later, but there's going to be projects and tasks that you're not going to want to do. So that's part of this,
Yeah.
like maybe it doesn't give you energy, maybe it takes away energy, but you have to do it. Part of this is
Mm-hmm.
figuring out like you can tackle those things a lot easier when you're fresh. If you're already at the end of your rope and you're like, yeah, I don't want to do that thing, like you're gonna put it off and put it off and put it off.
Yeah.
And so taking care of yourself makes those little tiny things easier instead of turning them into the thing that you just keep pushing off and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So spiritual one, that was not one that I was thinking of myself, but it's definitely something where I think a lot of us, we want like Daniel Pink has like autonomy, purpose, things like that in our work. So spiritual is
Right.
definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
Um, what's the difference between emotional and mental, as far as I guess how you would think of it, or how I don't know if you know what Tony how he separates this
I
out.
I don't know how Tony separates them out. When I think about the two, I think of mental being more reliant on knowledge or more connected to knowledge. So, like for instance, I'm taking a couple of courses right now, and so that is mental input and output happening there. But there's also like, there's definitely a physical element to that. And there's an emotional state that comes in. So
Hmm.
questioning whether what I've done is correct or not. But for me, the emotional side is more dependent on, I would say, like relationships, um, my own internal emotions. Did you wake up on the wrong side of the bed? It might have been reliant upon how much sleep you've gotten, things like that. That's how I've been looking at it.
Hmm.
What's his take?
Yeah, so his take, the biggest one, so like mental would be kind of going back to some of the past episodes that we've done with like attention, information
Aha.
overload, and multitasking. Those are like the
Yeah.
three bad things in that area where those are. I think most people think that in the mental category, like multitasking is a good thing, and there's some really good proof. And I think most of us can be really honest with ourselves and look back to when we're trying to do too many things at the same time. It feels like we're getting a lot done, but you're moving in a lot of different directions at once, which sometimes means you don't go anywhere, right? You have
Right.
we can use all the analogies. Too many pots on the stove, too many burners going, whatever. Too many irons in the
Yep.
fire. And there's a
Yep.
reason why there are so many of those. When I was promoting the show, we were posting on social media that like stick a fork in us, we're done, right? It's some of these things
Yeah.
they are they aphorisms? What's the right word for
Those
this?
are
And now
idioms.
idioms. Yeah, they're
I
idioms
think
that exist
my
for a
third
reason.
grader taught me that word. I was like, that's what that means.
Yeah, it's
Raining cats and dogs. It's not really.
it's not really, but I think they're all signed like they've been around forever. They're collective signs of distress and
Yeah.
overwhelm, right?
Yep.
So and then emotional. I'm gonna just cheat here a little bit. Is definitely more on how am I feeling moment to moment. So you might, and I will say the social media and our, we'll just keep
Mm.
plugging old episodes, but like the social dilemma would come in here. It's that
Hmm.
if I find myself feeling bad when I do the same thing over, like if I'm like, okay, this person is rubbing me the wrong way every time I see something that they post on social media, it's
Yeah.
probably time to unfollow that person or hide them or whatever that is. But
Hmm.
I think it's weighing in like why am I feeling the way that I am, and checking in with yourself kind of moment by moment to understand like why you're having that
Oh.
response.
Okay, that is interesting. Yeah, because I wasn't thinking of that being the input, thinking of it in input output terms that way.
Mm-hmm.
So the input would be, here I am doom scrolling, let's say. This is upsetting me. Instead of using one person as an example, just the act of social media, this is upsetting. Why am I doing this? Why am I in this position? I can turn it off and I can walk away.
Yeah.
So then the output is either I walk away and I feel crap, or I make that conscious decision to walk away, take a deep breath, and not let it sap
Mm-hmm.
the energy.
Yeah,
Huh.
and I mean this one kind of
Okay.
goes along with physical and mental
Mm,
too, where I think some people beat themselves up that they watched their favorite show on Netflix or something. But you,
right.
if you intentionally consume a show with the intent of relaxing and letting your brain not think about work, that's good, right? Versus beating
Yeah.
yourself up the entire time you're watching it. You're not fully immersed in it. You're not fully there. And the other categories here are things like anxiety,
Hmm.
having more of like a flight or fight or flight response or reactivity instead of proactivity. They're all related in that you still need to rest. So if you want to rest and sleep, that's fine. If you
Hmm.
have done that and you want to watch the show and you've tackled the things you need to do, then go for it. If that gives you energy, if the show or the book or whatever it is that you're doing, it's like I don't like this book, you don't have to finish the book.
Right. I know,
But
which is a
yeah,
hard one.
but some
We
people
forget
think that
about that.
like if you're like a type A person that you should be creating all the time and not consuming, right?
Yeah.
There's some like misguided advice from like business entrepreneurs. Like the only way to do this is like I don't watch Netflix, I don't watch YouTube, I don't consume, I only create. And so if you're creating
Yeah.
100% of the time, you're just going to be burnt out. And
Yeah, and you're creating in a vacuum.
yeah,
You're not being inspired, you're not being influenced by anything.
yep,
And that when I think it relates to, that hustle culture of just keep going, don't look around, don't look behind, just keep forging forward. Which is really, I think, is taxing on all four of these dimensions that he talks about.
yeah.
Okay, so then how do we how do we perform our own audit if we're looking at, like for us, we were thinking, let's look back at the past month. So you and I working on a project here at work, it's been an intense month. So there's a high level of output and input um, going on.
Yeah.
And so what's the best way to like set up and do that? Set up our audits so that we understand exactly where we're spending our energy.
Yeah. So, really easy way to do this. You don't need to think about these four dimensions in everything that you do initially. It would be to get a calendar. If you do bullet journaling, this would be even easier for you. If you have a Google Calendar, you can go print it out. But you want to have an actual paper copy of this for this exercise. And what you want to do is get two highlighters, and they can be any colors. And you're going to basically go through everything you did. You could do a week, you could do a month. You probably don't want to go too far back because you're going to forget how you felt during some of those things.
Yeah.
But if you look back in a month, what I think about Google Calendars and things like that is that it usually represents what you hoped would happen in your day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's all the meetings and things, and as some people block out time for certain activities and stuff like that.
Right.
So it's what you hoped happened. And you want to go through that, and you can either mark if it happened or didn't happen, but then also highlight, choose one color to be highlighting things that give you energy or that give you a sense of accomplishment, purpose, things like that. And then highlight the other things that might pull away energy, maybe leave you feel depleted. Some of those things can still be good, but I think that's an opportunity to then look at and see, why did I feel that way? Is it that, this is again those meetings that could have been an email? Was it something that we've always done? Is it something that someone else always just shows up unannounced and wants me to do, when it would have been much more enjoyable if they gave me some heads up? So there's all these different things to think about, but really it's just, do I gain or lose energy from doing this thing?
Okay, so focused on our output with that then. Like when we're doing the review with the highlighters, we're looking at the output of whether the output was it's like positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement almost.
Well, I wouldn't say the goal is not to try to judge these things as you're doing it, right?
Right.
You don't.
Right.
You may come out of this with a lot of red. Like if you're doing red and green for good and bad in quotes, it's not necessarily good and bad, but some of these things again, they have
like
to
positive
get done.
and negative.
Yeah, some of these things have to get done, and maybe they always take away from you. If that's the case, we don't want to try to make ourselves be like, oh, it really wasn't that bad, right? We instead know, like, if every Friday there's a task you always have to do and it always takes energy from you, then you probably shouldn't have 4 other things that also take energy from you. And you probably shouldn't also have bad nights of sleep that night because you went out that night, right? So part of it's like knowing that like Friday's the day I do the hard things. Well, then I need to take care of myself Thursday night into Friday morning, and probably Saturday, right? And kind of give yourself that buffer. Just because hard things take longer than you think that they're going to take too.
Absolutely. Well, and it's funny is you've got me thinking, I'm like, hey, Wednesdays are my hard day. And because I'm tired today because I stayed up knowing that Wednesday is a hard day because I have deadlines for school for projects. It's, 11:59 p.m. But what hours am I working on that? So I have to backload, I've got to backload everything so that I'm working on the reading and I'm working on the material. But if I don't finish everything late on a Tuesday, that means I've got to finish late on the Wednesday.
Right.
So I either have to get a good amount of rest on Tuesday to prep for a late Wednesday, or I need to get all of my shit done on Tuesday and maybe a little bit of tweaking on Wednesday so I can actually go to bed at a normal hour. That just dawned on me.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, even this show we've talked about, like, maybe if this is part of that too, this show does not have to be a Wednesday at 5.
Right. We've talked about juggling around. Yeah.
And we also know that in general, this tends to be hard for people to tune into with family life and dinner and all that stuff too. So case in point,
it's hard to find.
You can look and I would be curious to see if you audited a Wednesday. Is it lots of red, and can you add green in there to give yourself those breaks? Because for me, it was always Fridays, right? We would have I would have meeting, and then we almost always would have something at lunch, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, when am I supposed to eat lunch? And it's like, well, I
Yep.
put myself in this situation. So every Friday was hard unnecessarily. And so figuring out how to create a little bit of buffer, create a little bit of work. And it's that balance, I guess, again, from distress and eustress, right? Distress
Yeah.
isn't bad. It's just going to take away energy from you. And eustress is going to be something that might be physically demanding, but also give you energy. And so how do you do that balance? And, people who run might have a runner's high. And
Mm.
so you might be able to go from doing a run in the morning that gives you that tailwind throughout the rest of your day. But if
Mm.
you were to do that every single day, then you better be making sure that you're eating right, sleeping right. It's gonna
Yeah.
come from somewhere. You can't just. I guess it's like energy. You can't just. It's literally energy, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah. You can't
there's
make it up
literally
out
the
thin air.
law, the conservation of energy. You can't
Right.
make and destroy it. It has to come from somewhere. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
we can apply that to ourselves for sure. So
Yeah.
this reminds us we keep making this disclaimer in all of our episodes, but the biggest reason, again, isn't to do this so that you can try and eke out more work, harder hours, maximal effectiveness, right? It's
Right.
spend more time doing the things that fulfill us. And yes, again, there's still going to be things that you have to do. You're not going to do only fulfilling things all the time, but it's to take care of ourselves and to approach those things from a place of rest and
Hmm.
power instead of feeling like life's like dragging you along. Because you can, for your example, if Wednesday is going to be bad, you have, you know, what does that mean? You have to do something over the weekend and Monday and
Yep.
Tuesday, and then
Oh
Wednesday's not
yeah.
so bad. So
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's, the way that my schedule is currently now, it's, okay, what do I need to adjust? Because we have a family that comes over on Tuesday nights. And it's like, well, if that's got to be a late night, then I need to be able to move. Yeah, it's a really interesting way of looking at the week. What now? So I know, like, I started out by saying and acknowledging that time and energy are not, they're not the same thing. I could spend a half an hour at the gym and then feel great because of that, I receive energy from it.
mhm.
If I extend that to an hour, it doesn't necessarily mean I get more energy from it. I might, you know, be tired after that type of thing. So, how do we fit? Will do the two, do you think like the two run parallel to each other as you're trying to figure out this energy audit? Or does time like not even play a part in it?
I don't know. I mean, I think I would answer that with a lot of people who don't do this, and I don't do this regularly, but I notice
Mhm.
that when I don't, it's when I'm run ragged, and again,
Mm,
letting the circumstances dictate my day instead of me dictating what I'm going to do that day.
right.
Is that most of the time people say they don't have time to do that, and
Yeah.
that's the irony of all of it. So yeah, you don't because you're not doing it, and we see the same with a lot of the time tracking. It's you have to
Hmm.
measure what you were doing, and I would encourage like if you think you sleep well, like and you don't track it, like I would track it, and you will start to see. Even if you don't necessarily do an energy audit, but like when we do work cycles, we have you fill out your morale and
Right.
your energy level at each cycle, and
Hmm.
that's to figure out like, well, I didn't sleep well last night, and I had low energy all day. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then if you're
Hmm.
also eating fast food and you're staying up late every night, like those are all going to compound. And I personally am specifically drawn to when he mentions that people take their physical health as like a birthright and that it's taken for granted, because it's
Hmm.
really when there's a problem that makes you stop that you start to reevaluate all of that. And,
Yeah.
I've run into that. We've had other guests on the show who have mentioned that really made them stop and think about like, what am I doing, and
Hmm. Hmm.
what am I busy with, not just like, why am I busy.
Right, right. Well, a quote I heard not too long ago, it was like, if you're living your life like it's on fire, you are going to burn out.
Yeah,
Like it just is what's going to happen. And I find myself remembering that on a constant basis and being like, okay, hold on,
yeah,
take a deep breath. If I am 30 seconds later to whatever I'm, if I take just 30 extra seconds to finish what I'm doing, is everything going to implode? No.
Mhm.
So, yeah, maybe I should drive the speed limit in the snow. Maybe I don't need to be racing around, those types of things.
Well, that's actually a
Yeah.
good point. Like, this might be projection, right? But we are seeing, I mean, I see this in Reno a lot. Like, people are racing to get everywhere. People
Yeah.
are anxious. People are upset with each other. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everyone, and we get it, we're in a pandemic. So, like, when you think about the
Yeah.
emotional and the mental side of this, for some of it,
Yeah.
it's also winter. And so there's the physical limitations of, like, you can't get out as much. Everyone's really pent up. And most people are
Mm-hmm.
just exploding that over everyone else as they interact with their day. And then they're wondering, like, why am I angry? Why am I unhappy? Why, all these things. And so, we've said it again. We'll just keep repeating it. There's a theme where, like, everything influences everything. Like,
Yeah.
your money habits, your food habits, your sleep habits, they all affect
Mm-hmm.
everything else because you take those into the day with you, and if
Yep.
you plan it out, then you can control the day instead of it controlling you.
Yeah, and if you're wondering about how Reno as a whole is feeling on the emotional scale, I suggest you step
Yeah.
outside our building and watch the
Cool.
traffic at Mount Rose and Plumas, because that is a very interesting indicator of the well-being of the residents of Reno, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah. Just driving home every day too. It's like, yeah, it's a
Uh-huh.
lot. It's a lot.
No matter what time of day, you can get a feel for how everyone is feeling based on how much noise comes from that single
Yeah.
intersection.
So Zach mentions limit context switching to conserve energy, or rather maintain
Mm.
momentum. So that's definitely a big one because everyone hears this, like, when you switch. It depends on what your task is, but
Mm-hmm.
for software developers, for creative people, it takes like 15 minutes to get back into the flow. So if you worked on something for 20 minutes, switch to something else for 20 minutes, like, you only got into flow for like 5 minutes before you switch into something else. So it's
Yeah.
better to do one thing quickly or fully, and then switch to the
Mm-hmm.
next thing, even though it doesn't feel as productive. And,
Yeah.
though every project, the last little bit always takes the longest. It's always the hardest because you're like, that's when you're like, oh, I could be working on this other cool thing that,
Right.
the first part of that project is so easy and I just want to do that. And so you start lots of things, but you never finish things. And that's,
Mm-hmm.
I'm very guilty of that frequently. But
I had learned the method, and I don't remember where I learned the method, but learned it a book or something where it said, you have like scratch paper, just paper sitting next to you. And so I'll have a notebook or something like that. But when I'm doing a project or focused on a thing, I still have tasks, or that reminded me to do this, and
mm-hmm.
oh, and then when I do that, I've got to do the thing, and then, oh yeah, I've got to. So that monkey brain, right? So instead, it's
Yep.
just write down every single task that comes into my head so that I can get rid of it. A, it like leaves my head is the intention. And then B, I can go back and add all those bits
Yeah.
to my actual list, which is why I think after a couple days, I have like 4 or 5 pieces of scratch paper I have to throw away
Yep.
because I've essentially consolidated now.
Lists. I
It's
think
not exactly efficient.
it's not efficient, but I do think that's why I think a lot of our members really like the bullet journal method, is that
Mm-hmm.
it gets it out of your head. And again, like, if you're carrying it around in your brain,
Yeah.
like, rent free, like, it's going to cost energy. And we were talking about my other podcasts before the show, and it's literally, I have a reminder since the last episode.
Yeah.
And that reminder tells me every day it's time to do an episode. And I just dismiss it. But I literally, I mean, it's not that much energy to do that. But to me, I'm kind of carrying around this project that I probably should just say, like, that project is over now.
Yeah.
And then free up energy for another project. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, writing things down, I get into the zone and flow much better at night, which has made me
Yeah.
start to think, like, I don't want to restructure my days to work at night. Like, that's not realistic, but how do I do a little bit of that without sacrificing sleep?
Mm-hmm.
But you definitely have less slacks, less demands, less emails happening at that
Yeah.
time. So it's something to
Yeah.
think about.
Just work remotely. Just work for something on the other side of the world and
Yeah.
stay up. Although then you'd get the Slack and all the
Then
messages
I'll be
during
trying to
that.
sleep
So
during the
yeah,
day. Yeah, it doesn't sound like
yeah.
a good plan for me. But yeah, I think definitely invite everyone to try it. An energy audit,
Mm-hmm.
even if you want to just check out a week. Like if your weeks tend to have a
Mm-hmm.
pattern to them, like look at the last week because you'll remember how you felt during each of those things. And again, don't judge them. It's not a bad thing if there's a lot of things you're doing that take away a lot of energy. That might just mean you need to add some things that will give you energy, give you renewal, give you restoration. Or maybe you're finding that there's a lot of green and everything you're doing is giving you a lot of energy, which is awesome. Um,
Well done.
if, but I would
That's a good
also
thing to
say
know.
that maybe you might want to find something that might challenge you, right? Maybe are you
Mm-hmm.
in easy mode right now? Are you in the easy lane? And you know, are you hitting that spiritual level of like purpose and having that north star, and whether or
Mm-hmm.
not maybe it is good to have some good stress in your life. So
Yeah.
having something that can pull away from that energy is good.
Yeah, if anyone is in the easy lane, please email me the directions because
Or we
I
have some things that we
want
can
to
give you.
find
We have some
it.
things that
Yeah,
we can throw into your lane if
I
you
have a
want to take
couple
them.
tasks if you want to add them in there.
But
Oh boy.
yeah,
Well,
so
I
that's
think, actually, I really, because I really like this quote and what we had talked about was from Annie Dillard, the one, and you've mentioned it a number of times before. How we spend our days is how we spend our life. And I think that's a really good wrap up
yeah,
for everything that we've been talking about because that encompasses physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, how what we choose to focus on. And some of those things are stressful, and some of those things, you do have, there might be negative stress involved to get there to the positive outcome. It's
mm-hmm.
not always just the positive stress that gets there. But yeah, it's just, it is telling on reflection, wow, I spent a whole lot of time, dealing with texting back and forth with clients after hours. I really need to tighten that up and set some bound, those types of things that we can do based on reflection, because otherwise we don't learn and we don't move forward to where we want to be with
Definitely.
how we spend our life.
Yeah, I think to echo that one, I think a lot of people that I hear often like one day this will change, one day
Yeah.
I'll do it differently, and that is
Mm-hmm.
where that quote hits the most for me. Where it's like it, all these days are your life, so that one day, like
Mm-hmm.
I like to think of it as assume that nothing's going to change. What would you do differently, right? If you know
Yeah.
Wednesdays are always the hard days, what would you do differently?
Mm-hmm.
Like that was kind
Right.
of how I approached my freelancing work. Is like I was always getting paid late. So if we just
Yeah.
assume we're always going to get paid late, well, then we're going to change the terms of the contracts in the future. We're going to bill more. We're
Right.
going to get more projects. There's just a lot of things you can do. And the answer was to
Yeah.
like build a buffer so that no one check would cause me to worry, right? Like we see that time
Yeah.
and again, how many freelancers are like, hey, the checks come, and they're just like waiting for the mail. It's because there's not enough of a runway there, which we can all four of those categories again: physical, mental,
Yeah.
emotional, and spiritual. Like that's stress.
And that's exactly the same thing I need to do is build in the runway so that Wednesday isn't the bad day.
Right.
Wednesday might be a day where I'm tired, but I have to finish by Tuesday because the deadline is Wednesday. I
Right.
don't have to turn anything in on Wednesday. It's just that the deadline is Wednesday. I mean, hell, I can already tell there's people who are like getting stuff done way in advance, and
Yeah.
good for them. That's amazing.
Yeah.
But for me, it's got to be my own deadline is Tuesday night. And if I want to perfect something, then I can go back to it on Wednesday, but it's got to be done. I have to build that in. So
That's how it
Wednesday
works.
is a bad day of my own making is
Right.
part of this. Future topic.
Perfect.
So
What are we going to talk about
next week we are going to be chatting with a good friend of ours, Kelly Aguilera, with the studio here in Reno. She's a yoga instructor, but I know she does more.
Woman of many skills. Many
Yeah, well,
talents.
there we go. There we go. Many talents. So Kelly's going to be talking to us about a few ways that we can stay healthy working from home that is not workout based, but is, how we sit, what type of chair we sit in, types of exercises, movements we can do to avoid, the repetitive injuries of, looking over our keyboards, how
Yeah.
we're hunching, stretches to make that, to help our back, to help our hips, those types of things. But she's going to be at the studio filming so that we can watch her not test,
She can demo some stuff for us.
demo. Thank you. That's the
Yeah.
word.
Yeah, she teaches an
Blanked.
amazing.
Yeah.
If you've never done yin yoga before, I think they're still doing it on Zoom. They do some in-person classes still too. So if you've never done yin yoga before, it's like a very long stretch, basically. Like you're always sitting or laying down. There's no warrior pose, no tree pose, stuff like that. It's all, and it's amazing. Like you will feel like you just had a massage afterwards. So it's pretty amazing.
Okay.
But, so I'm sure she'll talk about yin a little bit in some of these things, but
Nice.
that's where a lot of her training's based. So
Wow. Okay. Well, I know I'm looking forward to that because now that my nights are filled with hunched over a keyboard or a textbook, I really need to work that out.
Build those exercises in.
Yes, exactly.
So
exactly.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. You can. We're still working on getting to 100 subscribers on YouTube so we can secure our name. So if you can go over to YouTube, even if you're on Twitch, and hit the subscribe button, that would be awesome. It's a strange thing we have to get over, but we'll get there. And we'll be here every week, Wednesdays until we change it. But
so we change it up.
Wednesday at 5. So we'll see.
Because no longer is Wednesday my bad day.
Yeah, it's not
your
Tuesday.
Bad day.
We're gonna make it work. So we'll see you guys all next week. See you guys online, and have a good night.
Thank you. Have a great night. Bye.